have my witness coordinator working on it right now. We're trying to get her down there today.
Okay. And I understand, Mr. Stone, but I guess what I'm trying to figure out is we discussed this on Friday, and we discussed how all the state witnesses would be done by Tuesday, and why then the flight arrangements weren't already made for her to come down here on Tuesday morning after she got back from the Turks and Caicos this morning.
Because as a practical matter, it still would have been impossible to get her down here today because she would have been flying from Pittsburgh today, and there aren't many direct flights from Pittsburgh. It's a 4.5-hour flight.
Actually, there's a direct flight at 7 o'clock in the morning. There are two direct flights that are early in the morning. Otherwise, that was the issue. Is it would be something that you would have had to have been prearranged on Friday. So I guess I'm trying to figure out, even though if she was in the Turks and Caicos, why the reservations
and I suspect she probably didn't walk through her front door until at 3 o'clock in the morning last night.
Okay.
So we're trying, Your Honor.
And the other option would have been just to fly her directly from the Turks and Caicos here. But all right, nothing was brought up at the time on Friday when we were discussing all the witnesses and the times or anything of that nature, because it could have been addressed at that time.
I understand, and it's very difficult to arrange. It's a very fluid situation, Your Honor. It's hard to predict when people are going to be on the witness stand and get on and get off.
With all due respect, Mr. Stone, it was definitely discussed on Tuesday, and it was decided the state's case would be done today. So that's where I have the issue because of that, and the fact of delaying things because of that when it could have been prearranged previously.
And Your Honor, I don't have if we can't get her down here today, I don't, up to the court, of course, but I don't have an issue with the defense starting to present their case, and then we can reopen it and put her on, and if they want to recall anybody based upon what she testifies, then I certainly don't have any issue with that either. But we're trying, Your Honor.
I understand you don't have issue with it, but I think delaying the jury would have issue with it, and that's what the court's concern is about. And specifically, that's why I ask you each day who the witnesses are, how long, and when they're going to be. All right. Now at this point, we've got Mr. Turpin here. Let's get the jury. We can continue the questioning. It was the redirect testimony by the state, and we were on the photographs. You had just been at that point authenticating the photographs. All right, members of the jury, we're continuing the testimony of Mr. Turpin. So at this point, it was on the state's redirect. Hope everybody had a wonderful evening, and at this point, Mr. Leo, you can continue your redirect examination.
Thank you. May I approach the clerk? May I approach the witness? Good morning, Mr. Turpin. Morning. We left off, we were reviewing some photographs. So I'm showing you, for the record, State's Exhibits 15E as an elephant through 15P as in Paul. Can you flip through these real quick? Okay, do you recognize those photographs?
Yes, sir.
And how do you recognize these photographs?
Those are photographs of our training class we took in 2012.
And are these fair and accurate depictions of what's contained in each of these photographs?
Yes, sir.
I'm also showing you 6V as in Victor. Do you recognize this?
Yes, sir.
And what is this photograph of?
It's a photograph of Jericho with the Jericho 941.
Is that the Jericho 941 in this photograph that you purchased?
That is?
The Jericho 941 that was stolen from your closet?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, this time we tender 6V and states 15E through 15P as in Paul into evidence.
Judge, in relevance, Your Honor.
As to all of them, or just,
Well, as, with the exception of the picture of the firearm.
okay. Approach? Objection overruled. What's been pre-marked for ID is State's Exhibit 6V will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 304 in evidence. And that's V as in Victor. What's been pre-marked for ID as it was 15, I know, until, okay, thank you. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 15E will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 305 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 15F will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 307 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for, or 306, what's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 15G will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 307 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 15H will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 305 and 308 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 15I will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 309 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 15J will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 310 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 15K will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 311 in evidence.
Okay, Mr. Turpin, is this the firearm that had gone missing from your closet?
Yes, sir.
Jericho IWI?
Yes, sir.
And is that, I'm sorry, Judge, Exhibit 304 for the record. And is that Jericho Fine holding that firearm?
Yes, sir.
That's the firearm you purchased?
Correct.
Now, with regard to the training that you mentioned you had with the defendant in 2012,
Yes, sir.
I want to show you some photographs from that, and maybe you can walk us through what we're looking at.
Sure.
I'm placing on the overhead Exhibit 305. Where is this at?
That is the Police Hall of Fame Museum and gun range in Cocoa.
And is the defendant in this photograph?
Yes, sir.
Can you indicate where he is on that photograph?
He's wearing the gray T-shirt towards the right side of the photograph.
So right there.
Yes, sir.
I'm showing you Exhibit 306. Is this at that same location?
It is.
And is the defendant in this photograph?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell me where he's at?
The gray T-shirt on the right side.
So for the record, I'm pointing to the individual in the gray T-shirt. And you guys are shooting on your back.
Yes, sir.
I'm showing you State's Exhibit 307 in evidence. Is the defendant in this photograph?
Yes, sir.
Can you show me where he is?
Yes, sir. Right side of the photo, gray T-shirt, white belt.
Right here?
Yes, sir.
And is he shooting from what position?
We are prone with one hand.
And prior to each of these positions being taken and the weapons being discharged, were you provided with instructions with what you were to do and how you were to do it?
Yes, sir. He was kind of showing us just the different ways and that when you're relatively comfortable with firearms that you might not even realize kind of how easy it was to say shoot left-handed like the first photo or something like that.
Showing you 308 in evidence. Is that another photograph of the defendant?
Yes, sir.
Where is he in this photograph?
The right side, gray shirt.
And again, you're shooting upside down?
Yes,
or
sir.
on your back, I suppose?
On our back, yes, sir.
Showing you 309 in evidence. Is the defendant in this picture?
Is the left side, the gray shirt.
Right there?
Yes, sir.
And what position are you shooting from here?
We're laying on our back, pointed forward, as opposed to over our head behind us like the last one.
Now, did this training also include some defensive tactics?
Yes, sir.
I'm showing you Exhibit 310. Is the defendant in this photograph?
Yes, sir.
Where is he in this photograph?
The gray shirt, pretending to throw me to the ground.
Right here?
Yes, sir.
And is that a Is that a dummy firearm in your hand?
Yes, sir, that's a dummy firearm.
Showing you Exhibit 311. Is the defendant in this photograph?
Yes, sir.
Can you describe the content of this photograph for the jury?
This was the conclusion of the training class. Paul, the instructor in the middle, kind of took all these photos to use as kind of like a promotional thing for having us out there. So we kind of took a group shot at the end for us and for him.
Showing you Exhibit 315. Is the defendant in this photograph?
Yes, sir.
Is he the individual in the gray shirt?
He is.
And what's the purpose of this exercise?
I think we were practicing the quick acquisition from the ground, as if you were thrown to the ground and how quickly to get the target.
Showing you State's Exhibit 314 in evidence.
Yes, sir.
And can you describe what we're looking at here?
This is the instructor. I can't tell specifically which drill, but he's giving us some type of instructions. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure which drill.
Okay. I'm showing you 312.
Yes, sir.
The defendant in this photograph.
He is.
And what's he doing here?
That is the left-handed shooting drill that I mentioned earlier, where he kind of was showing us that, hey, even though if you're non-dominant hand, from within a certain distance, you're still fairly accurate.
And was the instructor working solely with Grant Amato in this photograph?
In this photograph, he appears to be, yes, sir.
Showing you Exhibit 313. The defendant in this photograph.
Yes, sir.
And what does this photograph depict?
Just the right-handed accuracy, solo shot, so you don't have two hands on the rifle, or on the handgun, sorry, just how accurate you can be with a single.
And that's right-handed?
Yes, sir.
I'm showing you 316.
Same thing, but left-handed.
So both hands just separate.
Yes, sir.
And again, the instructor is with Mr. Amato on his own.
Yes, sir.
I don't have anything further.
Recross.
Good morning, Mr. Turpin.
Good morning.
You were just asked about the firearm. You showed a picture of it, and you were asked whether or not that was the gun that was stolen from your closet.
The photo of Jericho with the
Yes,
fire?
yes, sir. And your answer was yes, right?
Correct.
Okay.
May.
Well, first let me ask you this, Mr. Turpin.
Yes, sir.
Isn't it true you told the Orange County Sheriff's Office when you made the report on June 11th that you didn't know who stole that gun from your home?
What I told the officer was, I did not see anyone walk out the door with my firearm. However, I suspected it might be involved in this case.
That's not what you said. You said you have no proof and you don't know.
What I said was I did not see him physically take it, but I suspected it was involved in this case.
He doesn't believe, well, can I refresh your memory?
Yes, sir.
Can I question the witness, Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
Well done.
No, I know which part of it you're referring to. No, yeah.
Are you finished?
Yes, sir.
Can I have it back?
Yeah.
Now, isn't that what you told the Orange County deputy?
What I told the deputy is not necessarily what it says on the bottom of that page, sir.
Oh, so the deputy lied.
No, I was mistaken.
The deputy was mistaken. Is that your testimony?
What I told the deputy, sir, was that I did not see anyone leave with the firearm, but I suspected that it was involved in this. And his question to that was, did you see anyone take it? I said, no, sir.
And you didn't say that, you didn't believe that anyone took that firearm that night?
No, sir.
Even though it says it in the report?
That's correct. I immediately after filing that report came here to Seminole County to talk to an officer here.
Well, the deputy's report is incorrect, right?
That last line specifically
Is
not-
incorrect.
Is incorrect, yes, sir.
Okay. How about these photos? These photos were taken over 7 years ago, right?
Yes, sir.
He was around 22 years old.
Yes, sir.
As you can see in the pictures, he has a full head of hair, right?
Yes, sir.
And when did you turn these pictures over to the prosecution?
Objection, relevance.
Overruled.
You can answer.
The other day?
The other day.
Yes, sir.
You have an incredible sense of timing, Mr. Turpin, don't you?
What, I don't, what,
You waited just till a few days ago to turn these over to the prosecution. Yet you've had them for 7 years.
they've been,
Correct?
they're on Facebook and public record.
You waited 7 years to turn these over to the prosecution.
How would I wait? That doesn't even make sense.
The trial started 3 weeks ago, Mr. Turpin. You never turned these pictures over, did you?
I'm not, no.
No, you just did them a few days ago with incredible, impeccable timing, didn't you? Nothing further, Judge.
Any redirect?
Mr. Turpin,
Yes, sir.
when you sent these photographs to the prosecution, was that because you became aware that the issue of the defendant's proficiency in firearms was brought up in this case?
Yes, sir.
So before that, you had no idea that was going to be an issue in this case?
Correct.
No further questions.
Members of the jury, do you have any questions of this witness? Write them down, please. Approach. All right. Now, one of the questions, Mr. Turpin, I noticed in a previous evidence photo, Cody's carry gun had a red trigger assembly, and the barrel appeared to say Apex or something. Had Cody ever spoken to you about performing any modifications or upgrades to his carry gun?
Yes, specifically the M&P, the red trigger was something he did afterwards. I don't remember what else, but I know that that was just a nicer trigger he put into it. I think he did do something else, but I don't recall what it was.
Okay. Did the Jericho have a built-in laser or laser attached?
No, it had a railing on the front where you could do something like that, but I've never used anything like that.
Did you ever observe Grant utilizing a laser scope on any of his guns during shooting?
Not that I can recall. There might, I don't remember.
At any time, did the defense subpoena you to produce records or photos?
Just to produce the, no.
Pardon?
No, ma'am. Right.
This is a yes or no question. Do you know of any tension between Cody and Grant?
I mean, nothing more than the brothers, like a sibling thing. Cody and Grant had not,
Just yes or no? Okay,
again, nothing more than siblings. So,
all right.
no. not
What
really.
was their relationship like?
They were very close. I don't know how far you want me to go with any of that.
Did you notice any changes in their relationship towards the last few months?
More so that we didn't see Grant a couple times when we would hang out, and that Cody was paying for meals when we went out.
Okay. Any questions based on those questions?
Just one. Just so we're clear, the defense didn't ask you to produce any of those photographs or anything else?
Oh, the defense? No, sir.
The state did?
Yeah, sorry.
Mr. Turpin, we took your deposition, correct?
Yes, sir.
You made no mention of these pictures during the deposition, did you?
No, sir.
Nothing further.
Okay. All right, any redirect?
You asked any questions about those pictures?
I was asked no questions other than my relationship with Grant,
Nothing about firearms, anything like that?
just
your
about
relationship with
the
Mr.
memories and stuff we used to do together.
Members of the jury, do you have any further questions of this witness? All right, may this witness be excused and released?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, this witness is excused and released. State may call their next witness.
Thing called Richard Ruth.
Mr. Ruth, come forward, please. Raise your right hand and be ready to be sworn.
You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the complete truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you.
Have a seat in the witness stand as you're instructed. You may proceed.
Good morning. Can you please introduce yourself for the jury and spell your name for the court reporter?
My name is Richard Ruth, R-U-T-H.
And Mr. Ruth, how are you currently employed?
I'm employed with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement at the Orlando Regional Operations Center Crime Laboratory based in Orlando.
And how long have you been employed with FDLE?
Approximately 7 years now.
And what are your primary duties as a crime lab analyst in the firearms section?
In the firearms section, as a crime laboratory analyst, my primary duties are to examine fired ammunition components and determine whether or not they were fired from a particular firearm.
And have you had any other job titles at FDLE?
I did. Prior to being promoted to a crime laboratory analyst, I was a forensic technologist in the firearms section.
What's a forensic technologist?
A forensic technologist has less responsibility than a crime laboratory analyst. As a forensic technologist, my primary responsibility in that job title was to test fire firearms and determine if they were functional.
Now, can you tell the jury your education and training background?
I have 2 bachelor's degrees, a Bachelor of Science in Astronomy and a Bachelor of Arts in Physics from the University of Florida. All of my training that qualifies me and certifies me as a crime laboratory analyst with FDLE was received by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. It was a full-time training program. I went through 6 months of training to become a forensic technologist. That covered the different types of firearms, how to test them and determine that they were functional. After I was promoted to crime laboratory analyst, I underwent an additional 12 months of full-time training. That was primarily to learn how to use a comparison microscope to compare fired ammunition components to each other to determine if they were fired from a particular firearm.
And do you have to complete any proficiency testing on a yearly basis or annual basis to remain certified with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement?
I do.
And can you tell us about that?
So each year, as my main discipline is firearms identification, I have to complete a proficiency test that's administered by Collaborative Testing Services. Upon successfully completing that proficiency test, I'm allowed to remain certified for the next year. Also, as a sub-discipline, I do what's called serial number restoration for obliterated serial numbers on firearms. That's a proficiency test that I have to take and pass every 4 years to remain certified to do that service.
And do you belong to any professional organizations?
I do. I'm a provisional member of the Association of Firearm and Toolmark Examiners and have been for 4 years.
And is the FDLE laboratory where you work accredited?
It is. FDLE is accredited by ANAB. It's a forensic accreditation body. The purpose of accreditation is to ensure that our forensic laboratory is in compliance with and is following set professional standards in the industry.
Is that what it means to be accredited?
It is.
Now, have you testified before as an expert in firearms identification?
I have.
How many times?
Approximately a dozen in firearms identification, and then approximately 10 more times strictly for firearms function.
And can you tell the jury what a firearm is?
A firearm, it's a device that's designed to expel a projectile through the means of an explosive.
And what's ammunition?
Ammunition is commonly referred to as a bullet. However, it would be more accurate to call ammunition a cartridge. A cartridge is composed of 4 components. It's a cartridge case, a primer seated in the head of the cartridge case, a projectile, as well as the gunpowder within the cartridge case. The cartridge case is what holds everything together in that single unit of ammunition, the cartridge.
Now, how does a semi-automatic handgun work?
A semi-automatic handgun typically uses a magazine. Cartridges are loaded into the magazine, and the magazine is inserted into the magazine well of the pistol. The pistol has a part on the top of it called a slide. After the magazine's inserted, you can pull the slide to the rear. Releasing it, it's going to move forward under spring tension, and it's going to chamber a cartridge. The pistol should be ready to fire at this point, simply by pulling the trigger. Pulling the trigger is going to release the firing mechanism, crush the primer, fire the cartridge. The projectile is going to be expelled down and out the barrel of the firearm, and the cartridge case would be automatically extracted and ejected. The slide does that while moving rearward. It would chamber the next cartridge, and it would be ready to fire the next shot with a second pull of the trigger.
So the projectile goes out the front, and does the cartridge case eject out one of the sides usually?
Yes.
And when someone says caliber, with regards to describing either a bullet or a firearm, what does that mean?
Caliber, in its simplest terms, is simply the size of the ammunition that a firearm is designed to fire. More specifically, if you're talking about a projectile or a bullet, it's the approximate diameter of the bullet, or with a firearm, the approximate diameter of the barrel.
Now, through your training and experience, are you able to determine if a particular casing or bullet was fired from a particular gun?
I am.
And can you tell the jury how you're able to do that?
What I do is I look at an ammunition component and I determine its class characteristics. Those are the design features of the firearm that fired it, and those are features that are unique to that make and model, but they are designed to have that type of feature. The best analogy I can give for class characteristics that we all know are vehicles. If you think of a four-door Honda Civic, that is a sedan, it has four doors, that's a class characteristic that's decided by the factory. What I'm looking for in determining if a bullet or a cartridge case was fired from a particular firearm, I'm looking at what are called individual characteristics. These are random and unique microscopic imperfections that are imparted during the manufacturing process of a firearm, as well as the continued use and abuse of the firearm. To go back to the car analogy, if you go out into a parking lot and you're looking for your vehicle, the first thing you would look for are your class characteristics. Four-door sedan, maybe it's blue in color. There might be several of those in the parking lot. But to figure out if that's your car, you're going to look for the individual characteristics. There might be a sticker on the bumper, a crack in the windshield, coffee stain on the seat. You go out and using those individual characteristics, you know which vehicle is yours. As far as firearms identification goes, I'm looking at scratches or microscopic imperfections on either cartridge cases or projectiles to determine whether or not that was fired from a particular firearm.
And can you explain the rifling characteristics left on bullets?
So, depending on how a firearm is manufactured, they have rifling in the barrel. There's different means of the type of rifling. The purpose of the rifling is it's a set of helical grooves in the barrel, and as the bullet travels down the barrel, it's going to impart a spin to the projectile. The spin's going to make the bullet more accurate in flight and allow it to travel further. Based on the different types of manufacturing methods, it could be conventionally rifled, meaning that those grooves have sharp and distinct corners, or it can be polygonal, where the lands and grooves are more like peaks and valleys. They don't have a sharp or defined edge to those lands and grooves.
And can you explain how the bullet's imprinted by the barrel and the casing, how it's marked by the slide of the firearm?
So as the bullet travels down the barrel, it's going to pick up any scratches or imperfections that are on the barrel, and it's going to scratch the surface of the bullet that comes into contact with the barrel. With a cartridge case, it's going to be imprinted or move across the portion of the slide known as the breech face. Those imperfections on the slide because of the pressures involved, are going to imprint themselves on the primer. Any imperfections in the barrel can look like scratches on the side of the cartridge case. The firing pin of the firearm also leaves a dent in the primer of the cartridge case. Any of those imperfections from any of those parts I named are going to impart themselves on the cartridge case and leave its signature on the fired ammunition components.
Now, I want to draw your attention to the work that you did in this particular case. Did you analyze various items that were submitted to you from the Seminole County Sheriff's Office?
I did.
And did you receive any firearms in connection with this particular case?
I did.
And what firearms did you receive?
I received a Glock Model 17, a Glock Model 26, and a Smith & Wesson M&P pistol, all of them 9mm caliber.
And did you conduct analysis of those three firearms?
I did.
Draft any reports with regard to those three firearms?
I did.
Now, did you have any concerns about the packages or the storage of the items before you analyzed them?
No. As I received the packages, they were all in a sealed condition.
May I approach the clerk? Okay. I'm showing you what's been already introduced into evidence as State's Exhibit 94. Take a look at that box. Tell me if you recognize it.
I do recognize it.
How do you recognize it?
I recognize it by my markings that I left on the box, the FDLE case number, the FDLE item number, as well as my initials, and the yellow label applied to the box, which is, has that unique FDLE number.
And can you go ahead and open the box? And what's contained in this box?
It's a 9mm Luger caliber Smith & Wesson M&P pistol, one magazine, as well as one sealed manila envelope containing the tests that I generated during the examination of this pistol.
Okay, you go ahead and close that box. I'm showing you State's Exhibit in evidence 58. Do you recognize that?
I do.
How's that?
I recognize, as I did the other one, the FDLE case number, item number, as well as my initials that I applied to the packaging.
And would you open the box? And what's contained in this exhibit?
This is a 9mm Luger caliber Glock, Model 17, one magazine, as well as one sealed manila envelope containing the tests I generated during examination of this pistol.
So you conducted an analysis of this pistol as well.
I did.
Showing you State's Exhibit already in evidence 132. Do you recognize this exhibit?
I do.
How do you recognize it?
I recognize it by my markings on the box, the FDLE case number, item number, as well as my initials.
And would you open the box? Can you tell the jury what's contained in this particular box?
It's one 9mm Luger caliber Glock, Model 26, semi-automatic pistol, one magazine, as well as one sealed manila envelope containing the tests that I generated during the examination of this pistol.
So you conducted an examination of this pistol as well.
Yes.
Mr. Ruth, the process by which you conducted the examination that you already testified to as to how you conduct the examination with these various firearms, did you follow that same series of steps for each one?
I did.
May I approach the clerk? Okay. I'm showing you, for identification purposes, 55, State's Exhibit 55 already in evidence. State's Exhibit 59 in evidence. State's Exhibit 56 in evidence. Do you recognize those? Oh, excuse me, and State's Exhibit 60 in evidence. Do you recognize those envelopes?
I do.
How do you recognize them?
I recognize them by my markings on the packaging, the FDLE case number, item number, as well as my initials.
And can you tell the jury, we can go one at a time, pick, let's say, Exhibit 55.
Mhm.
Can you tell the jury how you examined number 55?
Is it okay if I refer to my notes to remember exactly which item this was?
Would that refresh your recollection?
It would.
Your Honor, may he?
May, let us know when you're finished.
Okay, I'm ready.
Is your memory refreshed?
It is.
Have you posted your notes?
Completely closed.
Now, sir, could you tell us about State's Exhibit 55?
State's Exhibit 55 is a cartridge case. I documented the condition of the packages received. It was sealed. And after opening the package, I did an inventory of the contents. I noted that it was a 9mm Luger fired cartridge case. And I was able to put that on the microscope and determine that there were individual characteristics on the fired cartridge case.
And I draw your attention to State's Exhibit 56. Did you conduct an examination of that exhibit as well?
I did. I went through the same steps as described before. This one also is one fired 9mm Luger caliber cartridge case.
And State's Exhibit 59?
This was a slightly different examination. This packaging contains a fired projectile or a fired bullet. Instead of it being a cartridge case, this is the projectile that is expelled out of the barrel of a firearm. I put this under a microscope. I determined its class characteristics, measured its diameter, and determined that it was a .38 caliber class projectile. .38 caliber class is kind of a misnomer. What it is, it means that it's a projectile with a diameter of approximately 0.355 inches or 9mm. Its weight, its diameter, its appearance is consistent with a 9mm caliber bullet. I determined that it was polygonally rifled with 6 lands and grooves with a right-hand twist, and determined that there were some individual characteristics present on this bullet.
Draw your attention to State's Exhibit 60.
This is also a fired bullet. I went through those same steps outlined earlier for the previous exhibit, and I determined that it too was a .38 caliber class bullet, consistent with being loaded in a 9mm Luger caliber cartridge, polygonal rifling, 6 lands and grooves with a right-hand twist.
State's Exhibit 37 in evidence. Did you conduct an examination of that item?
I did.
Can you tell us what you did there?
This particular item is a fired cartridge case. It too is a 9mm Luger caliber fired cartridge case.
State's Exhibit 38.
This item is a fired bullet. I used the same steps to determine that it was the same class characteristics as the previous 2 items. .38 caliber class, consistent with 9mm Luger caliber, polygonally rifled, 6 lands and grooves with a right-hand twist.
State's Exhibit 92.
This is a fired cartridge case, also 9mm Luger caliber.
Did you conduct an examination of that as well?
I did. I also examined that one.
State's Exhibit 93.
This item is also a fired bullet. I examined it and determined that it was similar to the other 3 in that it was a .38 caliber class, 9mm Luger, consistent with that in weight, diameter, and appearance, polygonally rifled, 6 lands and grooves with a right-hand twist.
And Your Honor, with the permission of the court and the help of the deputy, I'd like to set up a table to publish all the 3 firearms and the projectiles as shell cases to the jury so we can discuss each item.
You may do so. Deputy Bradley.
Does Your Honor have a preference to where I place the table?
I'd prefer it right where you're at.
I'm going to leave them in the box, Judge.
All right.
Judge, with the court's permission, can I?
You can move around wherever you need to.
Thank you, Judge.
Mr. Ruth, would you mind opening up on each of these one at a time so we keep track of them?
Certainly. Any particular order?
Let's go numerically from the lowest. First one for the record is 56.
Oh, I'm sorry, I went in
Actually, let's
other
start with
order.
37, that's the lowest. State's Exhibit 37.
You happen to have any scissors available? Thank you.
So you now open 38.
Yes.
You've now opened 55. You've now opened 56. You've now opened 59. You've now opened 60. You've opened 92. And you've now opened 93. Okay. Now, sir, when you conducted your examination of each of these three firearms, the projectiles and the shell cases that were submitted to you by the Seminole County Sheriff's Office, were you able to reach any conclusions with regard to where the shell cases originated from? In other words, from which firearm?
I was.
And can you tell the jury how you were able to determine what shell cases came from which specific firearm?
So each one of these firearms was examined individually. I noted the make, model, and caliber, as well as the serial number. I also noted their condition and determined that they were all safe to test fire. Each one of these firearms was then test fired in our indoor firing range into what's called a bullet recovery tank. It's a large metal tank filled with water that allows me to safely recover any projectiles that are fired from each one of these firearms. They were test fired using laboratory ammunition, And after the cartridge cases were fired, extracted, and ejected, they were collected in our indoor firing range, and I collected the projectiles from the bullet recovery tank. With these known standards that I myself generated from these firearms, I was able to compare these standards, the cartridge cases, to the evidence cartridge cases that are on the table using the comparison microscope and comparing the correspondence of the individual characteristics on the test-fired cartridge cases to the evidence cartridge cases.
Now, sir, pursuant to your review and analysis of the firearms in this case, and I'm referring to State's Exhibit 132, Glock 26, found in a safe. Did those shell cases originate from this firearm?
No, they did not.
And to the best of your knowledge and experience, in a firearm that's located in a locked closed safe, discharge rounds on its own?
No, the trigger would have to be pulled.
With regard to the cartridge cases, did you make a determination as to whether State's Exhibit 58, the Glock 17, discharged these shell cases?
No, it did not.
With regard to State's Exhibit 94, were you able to determine whether the shell cases, that is the, for the record, the Smith & Wesson MP 9mm, were you able to determine whether these shell cases, 37, 55, 56, and 92, originated from this firearm?
Yes, I identified those cartridge cases as having been fired from that particular firearm.
Now, we've discussed the cartridge cases. I'd like to draw your attention to the projectiles. Mr. Ruth, did you conduct analysis of each of those projectiles in the manner in which you testified to earlier?
I did.
Were you able to determine whether those fired projectiles originated from State's Exhibit 94? That would be the M&P 9mm.
They did not. The rifling method that was used on the firearm to fire those bullets was that of having a polygonally rifled barrel. The Smith & Wesson M&P has conventional rifling. Those projectiles were not fired from that firearm.
So, just so we're clear, I'm picking up State's 37, okay? And I'm picking up State's 38. State's 38 did not come from State's 37.
That's correct.
And you said that the barrel lane in the M&P is conventional. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And akin to your description of class characteristics with regard to like the Honda Civic or whatever, between polygonal rifling and conventional rifling, are those two totally different styles of rifling?
They are.
So would that be akin to saying that a Porsche 911 is not a Honda four-door Civic?
That'd be an accurate characterization.
Okay. Now, I'd like to discuss with you the Glocks that you also examined. Does the Glock have polygonal rifling?
Both of those Glocks do have polygonal rifling.
And you've already testified that a gun in a safe can't shoot anything, so I'm not going to put it up and take it back down again. Now, the exhibit, State's Exhibit 58, okay, this is the Glock 17. So for the record, this is the firearm that's found in the Shadow model. This has polygonal rifling.
It does.
Now, can you tell the jury the way that you are able to classify the characteristics for purposes of inclusion or exclusion?
So in examining a fired projectile, what I'm noting on the bearing surface of the projectile are those individual characteristics. What I'm looking for are quantity, quality, the spatial relationship of the markings on the projectiles. On these evidence projectiles here, there are very few markings on them. The bearing surface of the bullet is relatively smooth. So really, it's lacking in quantity and quality of those individual characteristics. The Glock, on the other hand, looking at its test-fired bullets, there were a lot of markings present on the bullets. Quantity, quality, there were markings there. So in comparing these evidence bullets to the bullets that I test-fired from the Glock, I'm really evaluating, are there differences or are there similarity in these individual characteristics to one another?
Sir, I'm going to place on the overhead for demonstrative purposes, State's Exhibit 14J, with no objection from the defense.
All right.
Okay, the top of this document is called Range of Conclusions. And sir, do you recognize the language that's contained in this sheet of paper?
I do. It's the language that we use in our standard operating procedures, FDLE's range of conclusions used for firearms identification.
And was this the range of conclusions you used in this particular case?
It was.
And with regard to the fired projectiles, the State's 38, 59, 60, and 93, as it concerns the Glock that is sitting in front of the jury, that being State's Exhibit 58, what, on this chart of range of conclusions, where did your conclusion land?
My conclusion on these evidence bullets to that Glock, it fell under the inconclusive with the negative sign next to it. That is an abbreviation for negative inconclusive. I can't conclusively eliminate the bullets as having been fired from this firearm. I believe it's unlikely that they were, based on the differences in the individual characteristics that I was discussing earlier.
So it's one shy above elimination.
It's that one step above, yes, out of these 5 conclusions that I can reach.
And as to the M&P firearm and the shell cases, where does, and the projectiles, excuse me, where does that M&P fall on this chart?
The cartridge cases, they fall at the top. They fall under the identified conclusion. The projectiles, on the other hand, fall down at the bottom, down under eliminated. That's due to a difference in class characteristics.
So the Honda versus the Porsche,
Correct.
as opposed to the Honda versus, I don't know, four-door Lexus.
I'd say maybe Honda Accord versus the Honda Civic.
Now, how can you be sure that, let me ask you this question. Is it possible that in any way, shape, or form, that these projectiles could have come from those shell cases?
Not based on the class characteristics, no. Those cartridge cases were fired in the M&P. The bullets were not.
And so how would you explain how those shell cases ended up at a crime scene where the bullets didn't match?
Objection, speculation.
Overruled.
You can answer the question.
I'm sorry. I would say that there are at least 2 firearms represented here. Either the cartridge cases that those projectiles came from were not sent to me. They're not present for examination, whereas the other cartridge cases happen to be collected and sent in for examination.
I want to ask you specifically about another firearm, and that being an IWI Jericho 941. Are you familiar with that firearm?
I am.
And is that pursuant to your duties as an FDLE firearms analyst?
Yes.
And what can you tell us about it?
The IWI Jericho, the IWI stands for Israel Weapon Industries. It's a semi-automatic pistol that comes in a range of calibers, including 9mm Luger caliber. The barrel of this firearm would be polygonally rifled.
Now, of course, you did not receive that firearm to do any analysis on.
That's correct.
It was never located. But your testimony is that the rifling in a Jericho IWI is polygonal. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what was the rifling on the projectiles?
Judge, we would raise our Daubert objection at this time.
What was the rifling characteristics on the projectiles?
The projectiles are polygonal, and the barrel on an IWI Jericho, if it's unmodified, should also be polygonal.
And so a polygonal barrel makes polygonal markings on fired bullets.
That's correct.
If I can have a moment, Judge. Nothing further, Judge.
Cross?
Good morning, Mr. Ruth.
Good morning.
How long have you been doing this firearm tool mark analysis?
I've been on the bench since June of 2016.
Okay. And the Florida Department of Law Enforcement has been doing this tool mark analysis for a lot longer than that, correct?
That's correct.
Since before 2008, most likely, correct?
Correct.
For the record, Judge, I'm showing the state what's been pre-marked as Defense Exhibit D, and it's been previously provided to them.
Should we approach?
May I approach the witness, Judge? Now, Judge, for the record, I'm showing the witness what has been pre-marked as Defense Exhibit D. Mr. Ruth, have you ever heard of this document?
I have.
And you recognize it as the report to the President, Forensic Science and Criminal Courts, ensuring scientific validity of feature comparison methods, correct?
Yes.
Now, this report is sometimes referred to as PCAST, correct?
Yes.
And I'm going to refer to it as such. This report came out in 2016. Are you aware of that?
I am.
Do you recognize the authors of this report? I can turn it for you if you'd like. May I approach the witness, Judge? Down for a few pages.
Sure.
Do you recognize the authors of this report?
No, I don't.
So you're not aware of the people who did write this at this time?
I know that they weren't firearms and tool mark examiners.
Okay. Are you aware that Eric S. Lander, President, Broad Institute of Harvard and MIT, was part of this group?
Objection, improper impeachment.
May we approach? Are you aware of the authors of this report?
Objection has been answered.
Are you aware of the authors of this report?
I know that the report was authored. I don't know who the authors were.
Are you aware that Eric S. Lander?
Objection, improper impeachment.
Can you stand when you address the court?
Improper impeachment.
All right, sustained.
So based on the fact that you don't know who these authors are, I'm assuming you don't give this report any weight. Is that correct? Because you don't know?
That's not a proper characterization. There are some valid conclusions raised by that report. There are concerns, and it does bear some merit considering the conclusions raised in that report.
So you're saying it does get some merit, correct?
Yes.
So is that enough to say that it's authoritative, or some merit does not equal authoritative, in your mind?
I don't feel I'm qualified to really go forward saying that's an authoritative text. There are some things that I disagree with as well. It does bear some merit, though.
So you're saying that's not authoritative or it is authoritative?
I really can't render a conclusion on that.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Members of the jury, at this time, we've got a few things to go over briefly outside your presence, so I'm going to ask you to retire just briefly in the jury room. All right, Mr. Shapiro, you may proffer your questions as to the what you're indicating is an authoritative source for what is Exhibit D for State Defendant's Exhibit D for ID.
According to this PCAST report and its 2008 report, a National Research Council committee found that the, quote, "the validity of the fundamental assumptions of uniqueness and reproducibility of firearms-related tool marks had not yet been established." Now, this seems to call into question the methods you relied upon in coming to your conclusions in this case. Is that correct?
It would call into question that, but that would be the statement that I would disagree with.
Right, but it would call into question your methods used in this case, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Now, also, according to the PCAST report, with respect to firearms analysis, quote, "the 2009 Research Council report concluded that," the quotation starts later, "the 2009 National Research Council report concluded that, quote, sufficient studies have not been done to understand the reliability and reproducibility of the methods," unquote. That is, the foundational validity of the field had not been established. Now, this also seems to call into question the methods you relied upon in coming to your conclusions in this case. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, the report goes on to go over studies that had been conducted up to the publishing of this PCAST report in 2016. Are you aware of that?
I'm not aware of all of the studies. I know that they claim that only one of them really held scientific validity in their opinion, with which I would respectfully disagree. We've had research in the field going back approximately 100 years, and the one study that they quote, while it was good in determining a potential error rate for the entire discipline, that's not the only study that the science is based on.
Saying that according to this report, only one study is viewed as having scientific validity. That's your testimony?
Yes, they put a lot of weight on what's called a black box study, which I'm going to assume refers to a double blind, where those who issue the study, as well as those taking it, one, don't know the answers, and those providing it don't know who the participants are. What it's doing is ignoring the body of research conducted by my professional organization, the Association of Firearm and Tool Mark Examiners. None of that was taken into account for this report.
And the one study you're saying the PCAST refers to is an Ames laboratory study, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I'll get back to that in a minute, but according to the PCAST report, at present, there is only a single study that was appropriately designed to test foundational validity and estimate reliability. This is the Ames laboratory study. Now, going further into it, importantly, the study was conducted by an independent group unaffiliated with a crime laboratory, and although the report is available on the web, it has not yet been subjected to peer review and publication. Isn't that peer review process important to guaranteeing reliability and reproducibility of studies?
It is. In AFTI, in the journal, and the articles that are published, they must be peer reviewed prior to be published in the journal.
Okay, furthermore, when referencing this Ames study, the PCAST report goes on to say, the scientific criteria for foundational validity require appropriately designed studies by more than one group to ensure reproducibility, and because there has been only a single appropriately designed study, the current evidence falls short of the scientific criteria for foundational validity. So based on this statement, it appears as though the methods you relied on in this case fall short of foundational validity based on the PCAST report. Is that correct?
I strongly disagree with their statement.
But that's what the report says, correct?
That's what the report says.
And the report comes down pretty critical on the methods that you relied on in this case, correct?
Yes.
And these are methods that have been relied on by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement for a very long period of time, correct?
It is, but they only relied on one study. They ignored an entire body of research conducted by our field.
And they did that, according to you, incorrectly?
I believe so, yes.
Judge, that's the entirety of my proffer.
At this point, since we've already been going a little bit over an hour, it's about an hour and 10 minutes, since we've got the jury out, why don't we take a short recess ourselves? And this will be our morning break. That way we don't have to do it later as well. So we're just going to take a short recess for the attorneys and the court, as well as you as the witness. But sir, you're on the stand. So because you're on the stand, you can't talk to anybody, the state, anybody, because you're in the middle of your testimony. Understand that? All right. But you are free to step down if you need a stretch break or bathroom break. Okay.
Your Honor, I just want to inform the court that the earliest flight that we can get Allison and Eve in today is late in the afternoon, I think 4:40 or 4:50. That's when it arrives in Orlando. We'll put her on that flight, but regardless, so she'll be here.
All right. We have Sawyer, Edgar Perez, and Dr. Jones, but we'll be done this afternoon. The defense, what witnesses, the witnesses that you have that you were dealing with as far as Funk, Johansson, Young, and Correz, and Rupert, none of those deal with gunshot residue, correct?
None.
Okay,
We would prefer to go after the state's case rests.
I understand. But rather than inconvenience the jury to at that point, to break earlier, those are all short witnesses that we could do beforehand, so the court may proceed as to that. Instruct them, though, is of course that the state's witness, they did not have them here this afternoon in order to move forward, so therefore we are calling some witnesses out of order for the defense's case, and I will instruct the jury as such.